Good morning and welcome to Silverside Online, October the 11th, 2020. I'm delighted that you are joining us today. Welcome. The gathering theme for today and the sermon title is If God Kept Your Appointment Calendar. Subtitle, The Invincible Planner. As you know, if you attended our beautiful outdoor service last Sunday, or if you were able to listen to it online, you know that I am preaching a few sermons here in this beautiful early fall season on themes suggested to me by my family members and friends related to getting by during the pandemic, but not about how to deal with our solitude and our quarantine and so forth. That's already been dealt with. So aside from those, I asked my friends to give me a theme. Last week, my older son Jarrett gave us the theme. And this week, my friend Diane Chin gave us the theme. The title was mine, but the theme and the idea and the creative juices flowing motivation came from Diane. Diane is professor of New Testament at Palmer Seminary. We were colleagues for many years. For many of the years when I was teaching, she was not only a teaching colleague, but also the acting dean. I hold her in the highest esteem, professionally and personally. She's a brilliant scholar and a wonderfully compassionate, supportive person to her colleagues and her students, and she certainly was that to me. And I appreciate her deeply, admire her commitment to her faith, to her vocation, and to her determination to use her many, many skills to make a positive difference in the lives of her students and in the world. I hadn't spoken to Diane for a few months, so I didn't know that this was supposed to have been a sabbatical year for her. Well, it is a sabbatical year for her. It's just that she hasn't been able to travel outside her home in the Philadelphia area up close to the seminary. She said, I had a wonderful sabbatical year planned, and she outlined the cities that she had intended to visit, and she was going to use the uh, joy and the excitement of being in some of the world's great cities to be part of the inspiration to help her write. She's a great writer, um, but so devoted to her teaching and her students, and she takes more than her share of administrative responsibility, that she has not nearly enough time to write in the normal course of things. So a sabbatical year is especially important for Diane. Her last major work was a commentary on the Gospel of Luke, which has been received um, very well by the scholarly world. Um, but she's got a lot more to write. And the problem is finding time to do it. And this was going to be one of those years when several of those loose strands came together. She said, again, I had a wonderful sabbatical year planned, a hard-earned sabbatical year. And I think without insulting any of my former colleagues at Palmer, people would agree that Diane is the uh, hardest working faculty member of the bunch. Um, Even if they wouldn't agree with me, I still would say that, but not as a way of insulting anybody. Yeah. So she can't travel, and she's pretty much stuck between her house and her church, um, and Home Depot. She referred to herself in an email message she wrote to me as a true planner, and she's a great planner. And she said in the note, this planner's plans had to be pushed aside. But she has such confidence in God to um, help her redeem the time. So she also said, I trust God to make alternative plans that will make this time worthwhile for me in ways that I may also honor God, which is one of her primary goals in life. She wishes to honor God in all that she does. Um, so she writes as much as she can at home. Home is a very difficult place to write for almost all writers I know. Um, she runs to Home Depot. She does household repairs that will save her some time and money down the pike. Um, and she stays open to the possibilities for picking up on other opportunities as they open up. There's a new semester coming up, and a vaccine. Maybe all will not be lost. I hope the seminary will also be mindful of the fact that she has lost this sabbatical time and help her make that up. But she truly is someone who trusts God to keep her calendar book, and even in this pandemic where so many things have come to a screeching halt, um, she still has confidence that God will help her find a way to bring good out of the situation and help her find a way so that this time is not wasted for her scholarly endeavors. The first reading for this morning comes from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He wrote, in this revolution, no plans have been written for a retreat. Many of you know that one of the things I did not enjoy about being a teenager was that every single Saturday morning for years, my grandmother and grandfather visited us on Saturday mornings. Um, and one of the things I was required to do by my mother was to play the piano so that my grandmother could sing her favorite hymns. And I detested having to do that um, at all, particularly for as long as I had to do it. Um, but in reality, it kept my grandmother, who was not nice to my mother much of the time, out of my mother's hair. So I guess I was doing my mother a favor um, and bonding with my grandmother to the extent that that was possible. But I wish I could say I enjoyed it. I did not enjoy it, but I learned a lot of old hymns that I didn't already know. And one of them had the words that you see on the screen. Many things about tomorrow I don't seem to understand, but I know who holds tomorrow, and I know who holds my hand. I think that's pretty good theology, considering that there are many hymns that we love that have terrible theology. I think this is pretty good theology. In the pandemic, it is absolutely true. We don't know from one day to the next what the news is going to be. Much of the time through this pandemic, we've had much more bad news than good news. Many things about tomorrow I don't seem to understand, but I know who holds tomorrow, and I know who holds my hand. I love Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and I don't remember the circumstance in which someone um, that a committee she was on was interviewing, and the person being interviewed just kept talking right over her. So she simply started saying, uh, reclaiming my time, reclaiming my time. So the moderator would understand she expected to be able to not lose her time to somebody who was speaking over her. It became a great saying, obviously, on T-shirts and bumper stickers and all over the place. Uh, it's not a bad philosophy in life when something intrudes upon our time, taking us away from what we were invested in or involved in that we took to be very important. Reclaiming our time is a good philosophy. The Apostle Paul, in writing to the Christians in Ephesus, is not at the end, but sort of drawing things down. And this is right in the middle of a conversation that he's dictating. Uh, but we can pull it out, I think, without minimizing the value or significance of it or losing the meaning of it. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 and 16. So be very careful how you live, how you go about living, not as unwise people or anti-wise people, anti-wisdom people, but rather as wise people, redeeming the time, or making the most of the time, or rescuing the time out of. There's a preposition there in the word ex agorazo. Rescue the time that we have out of what would damage it or minimize it. The days are evil because the days are evil. So be very careful how you go about living, not as anti-wisdom people, but as wisdom people, redeeming the time, making the most of your time, rescuing the time that you have out of anything that would damage the time, the gift of time that you have from the influences of the times in which we live, which are unduly dominated by evil. The prayer I articulate today for all of us is very simple. It is Psalm 31, verse 14, and the first part of verse 15. May this combine with your prayers, or encourage you to pray, or inspire you to pray, but may we pray. I trust in you, O Lord, and I say, you are my God. My times are in your hand. Amen. The second reading for this morning is a portion of Robert Burns' famous poem, To a Mouse. Either Robert Burns or a character he imagined had uh, upset and torn apart a mouse's nest while plowing, uh, just as the colds of December were descending upon animals and humans. And he takes pity upon the mouse and envisions the mouse a friend and a sort of colleague. But mouse, thou art not alone. In proving foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes of mice and men go oft awry, and leave us naught but grief and pain for promised joy. this morning is from President Harry Truman. You can always amend a big plan, but you can never expand a little one. I don't believe in little plans. I believe in plans big enough to meet a situation which we can't possibly foresee now. Many of you will not talk about the leadership of God in exactly those terms, or maybe some of you don't believe in God's involvement in human destiny at all. To talk about God having a plan and interacting does get into the anthropomorphisms, which are dangerous. We recognize that they are metaphors. But many of us do believe that the Spirit of God, this energy that is alive and at work in our lives and in the world, lures us constantly toward what is healthy and wholesome and good. And it is that idea that I have in mind when I talk about God leading us. I normally will use the word lure because I think it is a softer way of getting across the experience that I have of that. Anyway, some life lessons on letting God take care of your appointment book. Number one, anything we're serious about in life, we need to plan for. There's no question about that. Sitting around and just waiting to see what's going to happen will get most of us nowhere. Following God's lead or lure does not mean passive planning, which is like no planning, nor does it mean the absence of planning. Planning is not a sign that we lack faith. It is a sign that we want to make the most of the gift of time and life that we have been given. And this is frustrating, but remember that God communicates in still small voices and silences most of the time, not through loudspeakers and skywriting or the latest, greatest app. God's lure is, by its very nature, subtle. We are never obligated to sign on for the plans toward which God lures us. Never. God never coerces. It is not in the nature of God to coerce. Most of the time, confirmation that we are following God's lure cannot be ascertained before we begin a journey. Only as we travel will we gain the confidence that the path we chose was the best one for now. All destinations toward which God lures us, all destinations that we find travel plans for in our appointment books, are temporary. Eventually, sooner or later, we're going to see travel time written once again into our calendars in handwriting not our own. God neither punishes us nor forsakes us if we decide to stay right where we are and continue doing exactly what we've been doing, even if we know God is luring us, pulling us in another direction, and we say, no, We're going to stay put. God does not punish us for that. God does not forsake us because we don't move. But the fact is, the journey will almost always get us to a more optimal place for our spiritual well-being, our spiritual health, and otherwise. More often than not, the schedule to which God lures us is more enriching, at least no less enriching, than the one for which we initially planned, even if the initial plan was also made with God's leadership in mind. So the pandemic hit. Many of us had plans. Many of us would be doing something very different right this minute if the plans that we had made could have come to fruition. But they could not because of safety concerns, because of travel restrictions, because of common sense, and a host of other related reasons. So we're doing something else or other things, plural. And we use the time to find ways to make life enriching as we wait for opportunities to open up so that we can get back to what was probably a strong, positive luring from God to head in a direction that God found healthful for us before this mess hit. Thank you, Diane, for giving me the spark to think about how important it is for all of us to lean into the lure of God, regardless of what's going on in life. And the companion reminder that detours often take us to safer roadways and scenic parkways. And what about calendar keeping? Well, good reminders that if you still keep a paper calendar, number one, make sure it's on sustainably grown uh, wood-based paper, but keep it written in pencil. If you keep an electronic calendar, make sure the delete function for entries works easily and well.